I saw a dog dragging a trash bag, and it had $2 million inside. Margaret Johnson never imagined that at 68, she'd still be counting every penny just to buy a loaf of bread at the end of the month. The pension she received barely covered the rent for the tiny ground floor room she'd lived in for 5 years, ever since she had to sell her house to pay off the debts left by her husband. It was on a grey Tuesday morning that she saw something that would change her life forever. A scraggly mutt with golden fur, far too thin for its size, was struggling to drag a black trash bag down the deserted street of Southside Cleveland. "Poor thing, what effort," she murmured, adjusting her shawl over her shoulders as she watched from the window. The dog stopped every few feet, panting, its ribs visible through its dry, matted fur. Margaret felt her heart tighten. Even with her own struggles, she couldn't bear to see an animal suffering. She stepped outside and approached slowly, reaching out her hand. "Come here, sweetie, what are you doing with that?" The dog looked at her with tired eyes but showed no fear. When Margaret touched the bag to help, the old plastic tore completely. Bundles and bundles of money spilled onto the wet pavement. Margaret instinctively stepped back, her heart racing. They were $100 bills, all bound with rubber bands, dozens of them. She glanced around the empty street, then at the dog, which had collapsed beside the fortune, breathing heavily. "Good heavens, what is all this?" Her hands trembled as she quickly gathered the soaked bills. She couldn't even count them properly, but she could see there were many, so many. Enough to solve all her problems and then some, but the dog was clearly in bad shape. Its paws were wounded, and it looked like it hadn't eaten in days. Margaret alternated between staring at the money and the animal, torn between urgent need and her conscience. "You're not well, are you, sweetheart?" She made a decision that surprised even herself. She quickly gathered all the money, stuffed it back into the torn bag, and ran home. She returned with a cloth bag, transferred the bills, and hid everything under her bed. Then she went back and scooped the dog into her arms. It was heavier than it looked, but Margaret was strong. She'd cared for her bedridden husband for 2 years before he passed, and she knew how to carry weight when needed. "Come on, sweetie, first we take care of you." The nearest vet was 6 blocks away. Dr. Richard was known in the neighborhood for fair prices and payment plans. Margaret arrived breathless at his small clinic, the unconscious dog in her arms. "Mrs. Johnson, what happened?" "I found him on the street, doctor. He was dragging a bag and then collapsed. He looks really sick." Richard examined the dog quickly. He was a man in his 50s, with a salt and pepper beard and gentle hands. "He's been malnourished for weeks. And look at this." He showed Margaret the collar she hadn't noticed before. It was fine leather, with a small golden tag. "This collar is expensive. It has initials engraved, CR, so he must have an owner." "Yes, but given the state he's in, either the owner is missing or, well, anything's possible these days. I'll give him fluids and vitamins. It'll cost $120. Margaret swallowed hard. That was nearly half of what she had for groceries this month. But she thought of the money hidden at home and nodded. "Go ahead, doctor." While the vet tended to the dog, Margaret couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Where had all that money come from? Why was the dog carrying it? And most importantly, what should she do? "Mrs. Johnson, can I make a suggestion?" Richard said, washing his hands after the treatment. "Take him home. Give him light food and water. If no one comes looking for him in a few days, he might just be your new companion." She agreed and went back home with the dog wrapped in an old blanket. She prepared a warm spot in the living room and offered some leftover rice and chicken from lunch. The dog ate slowly, cautiously, but he ate. Then he curled up in the blanket and fell asleep. Margaret stood there looking at him, then at the room where the money was hidden. What a strange situation. If she told anyone, no one would believe her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The next morning, the dog was livelier. He accepted more food and even wagged his tail when Margaret approached. She decided to call him Goldie because of his fur color. "Hey there, Goldie. How are you feeling?" But her peace didn't last long when there was a knock at the door. It was Mr. Howard, her landlord, a man in his 60s, always serious and punctual with rent collection. Mrs. Johnson, we need to talk. Her heart raced. She knew she was behind on rent, but didn't expect him to show up so early in the month. Of course, Mr. Howard. Come in. I'd rather stay here. You owe 3 months' rent. Today's the 15th. If you don't settle up by the end of the month, I'll have to ask you to leave. Margaret felt the world spin. 3 months meant $1,800. Money she simply didn't have. Mr. Howard, you know I'm good for it. It's just that my pension isn't stretching far enough with all these price hikes. I understand, Mrs. Johnson. You've been a good tenant, but I've got bills to pay too. 15 days, all right? After he left, Margaret sank heavily into the kitchen chair. Goldie came over and rested his head on her leg as if he understood her distress. She glanced at the room where the money was hidden. It would be so easy. Take what she needed, pay the rent, buy decent food. But what if the money had an owner? What if someone was looking for it? What do you think, Goldie? What should I do? The dog just looked at her with his intelligent brown eyes. Margaret decided to wait a few more days. If no one came looking, maybe she could keep at least part of it. But on the third day, everything changed. She had gone out to buy bread when she saw an elderly man walking slowly down the street, looking around. He was tall, thin, with completely white hair and simple but clean clothes. He must have been in his 70s. "Excuse me, ma'am," he approached. "You haven't seen a stray dog around here, have you? Goldie, medium-sized?" Margaret's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, sir?" "My dog went missing 4 days ago. His name's Buddy. He has a leather collar with my initials. I've been searching the whole neighborhood." "Are you CR?" The man's eyes lit up. "I'm Clarence Roberts. You've seen him." "Seen? Please tell me you have." Margaret took a deep breath. She couldn't lie to this man who looked so worried. "Come with me, Mr. Roberts." She led him to her house. When Goldie, or Buddy, saw the old man, he went wild with joy. He ran, jumped, barked, licked his owner's face with such happiness that Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Buddy, my boy, where have you been?" Clarence knelt on the floor, hugging the dog, and Margaret noticed he was crying too. "I've had him for 8 years, ever since my wife passed. He's all I have left of her. He was hurt when I found him, Mr. Roberts. I took him to the vet." "You did that?" Clarence stood up, emotional. "How much did it cost?" "I'll pay you back." Margaret hesitated. This was the moment to bring up the money, but something in the man's worried expression made her ask instead. "Mr. Roberts, was Buddy carrying anything when he went missing?" The old man's face went pale. "How did you know that?" "Because I saw him dragging a bag. And, well, the bag tore." Clarence leaned against the wall, trembling. "That was all I had, ma'am. Margaret, Mrs. Johnson. It was my entire life savings from 40 years of work. $400,000 I kept at home." "Why so much money at home, Mr. Roberts?" The elderly man sighed deeply. "Because my daughter has been trying to put me in a nursing home for 2 years. She wants my house and my pension. I don't trust banks. I was saving up to buy a small place somewhere else, far from her." Margaret felt her chest tighten. She'd heard stories like this before. Children who wanted to get rid of their parents to take their belongings. "The money is here, Mr. Roberts. I kept it all." The relief on the man's face was indescribable. He sat in the kitchen chair and buried his face in his hands. "You saved my life. And you saved Buddy, too." "But how did he end up with the money?" "I hid it under his doghouse in the backyard. Last Sunday, my daughter showed up with some papers saying she was taking me out for a ride. She snooped around the whole house. Buddy must have sensed danger and grabbed the bag, and ran off with it." "Exactly. He's always been very protective of me. When my wife fell ill, he never left her side." Margaret brought the bag with the money. Clarence quickly checked and confirmed it was all there. "Mrs. Johnson, how can I thank you? You could have kept it all. It's not mine, Mr. Roberts, but you spent money on the vet, and from what I see, you're not exactly rolling in it either." Margaret blushed. It was true, but she didn't want charity. It was the right thing to do. "Then let me do the right thing too. How much do you need to get by?" She hesitated, but finally told him about the overdue rent and her struggles that month. Clarence insisted on giving her $1,000. "I can't accept that much." "Yes, you can." "If it weren't for you, I'd have lost everything." Margaret accepted, moved. For the first time in months, she wouldn't have to worry about money. But the peace didn't last long. The next day, an elegant woman knocked on her door. She looked about 45, well-dressed with an unfriendly expression. "Are you the one who found my father yesterday?" "I'm Margaret. And you are?" "Carol Roberts, Clarence's daughter. I need to talk to you." Margaret let her in, already suspicious. "My father is senile, you know. He can't manage his own affairs. This story about hidden money is just his imagination." "But I saw the money, Ms. Roberts." "What money?" She glanced around the modest house. "Where is it?" "I returned it to your father, of course." Carol turned red. "You had no right to do that. My father isn't mentally capable of handling that much money." "He seemed very lucid to me." "Because you don't know him. He has episodes. He forgets things. He needs special care." Buddy, who had been lying in the living room, began to growl softly as Carol raised her voice. "Even his dog is aggressive. Proof he can't even take care of an animal." "Buddy isn't aggressive. He's protective." "Protective?" Carol let out a bitter laugh. "That mutt almost bit me last week when I visited my father." Margaret paid attention to the dog's reaction. She'd always believed animals had a sixth sense for bad people. "Ms. Roberts, your father seemed very capable to me." "Because you don't live with him. I've been trying for 2 years to get him declared incompetent. I have medical reports." "What kind of reports?" "Private doctors confirming he has early dementia, but he disappears every time I schedule an appointment." The conversation was interrupted by Clarence's arrival. He carried a grocery bag and stopped in the doorway when he saw his daughter. "What are you doing here, Carol?" "I came to get you, Dad, and to recover the money this woman wrongly returned to you." "She returned it rightfully. It's my money." "Dad, we've already talked about this. You're not in any condition to handle so much money anymore." "I am. I worked 40 years to save this up." "Doing what, Dad? You were a butcher your whole life. Where did all this money come from?" Clarence straightened up with dignity. "I woke up at 4 in the morning, worked till 9 at night. Your mother sewed at home. We saved every penny. Never spent on anything unnecessary." "That was decades ago. You don't even remember what you ate yesterday." "Yes, I do. I had rice and beans with a fried egg for lunch. For dinner, bread with margarine and coffee. Same as every day because that's all the retirement money can cover." Margaret watched the argument with growing indignation. The man seemed completely lucid. "Carol, leave your father alone. Stay out of this. This is family business." Buddy stood up and positioned himself between Carol and Clarence, growling. "See, that animal is dangerous. He only growls at you, Carol. Ever notice that? Because you taught him to hate me." "I did no such thing. Buddy's a good judge of character." The argument heated up until Carol left, threatening to return with a court order. After she was gone, Clarence sat down, defeated. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm sorry about that. Don't apologize. Is she always like this?" "Ever since her mother passed, before she'd visit, bring the grandkids, once she found out about the inheritance I'll leave, she changed completely." "What inheritance?" "The house is worth about $300,000, plus the retirement and the money I've saved. Carol estimates it's nearly $3 million total. That's a lot of money. That's why she wants to put me in a home. If I'm declared unfit, she gets everything as the only child." Margaret shook her head, upset. "And the grandkids, they don't come anymore." "She forbade it, said Grandpa's sick and might scare them." It was a heartbreaking situation. Margaret had only known Clarence for 2 days, but she could already tell he was a decent, kind man. "Mr. Roberts, can I ask you something? Why don't you put the money in the bank?" "Because she has access to my accounts. She's been authorized since my wife got sick. If I deposit it, she'll see and find a way to take it." "What about moving somewhere else?" "I've thought about it, but I'm afraid she'll get the guardianship first. If that happens, I can't buy or sell anything anymore." It was a terrible dilemma. Margaret felt deeply for the old man. "Want some advice?" of course. Find a lawyer, someone who knows about these things. With what money? And Carol knows half the lawyers in town. Her ex-husband's a prosecutor. The situation seemed hopeless. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, Clarence started visiting Margaret's house. He'd bring Buddy to play in the small backyard and they'd talk in the kitchen. She learned he'd been a widower for 3 years, lived alone in a house too big for him, and spent his days watching TV. You know, Mrs. Johnson, it's been a long time since I've had a good conversation like this. I feel the same, Mr. Roberts. It's so quiet here at my place. Were you ever married? I was. My Walter passed 4 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. And your wife? Diabetes. It just got worse and worse. In the end, she barely recognized me. They understood each other well. Both had endured the hardships of caring for sick spouses and now faced loneliness. Mr. Roberts, can I ask you something that's been on my mind? Go ahead. How did Buddy manage to carry so much weight? That bag was heavy. Clarence smiled. He's stronger than he looks, and determined. Once, when he was younger, he dragged a 20-pound bag of dog food across the whole yard. But why did he do that? How did he know to protect the money? I can't explain it. He's always been very clever. When my wife was sick, he would stand guard in her room. If any stranger came near, he'd alert us. And with your daughter? Buddy never liked her, even as a puppy. My wife used to say dogs sense people's souls. Margaret agreed. She believed it too. The following week, Carol showed up again, this time with a man in a suit. This is Dr. Gregory, a lawyer specializing in guardianships. We're here to take my father. Your father isn't here. We know he comes here every day. You're influencing a vulnerable elderly man. I'm not influencing anyone. Yes, you are. You've filled his head with ideas about autonomy and independence. My father needs care. The lawyer stepped forward. Ma'am, your behavior could be classified as elder exploitation. It's a crime. What exploitation? I'm not asking him for anything. But you're benefiting from his weakened mental state. His mental state is just fine. Just then, Clarence arrived with Buddy. The dog immediately went on the defensive when he saw Carol. Dad, it's time. Dr. Gregory will help with the guardianship papers. I'm not signing anything. You don't have to. We already have the medical reports. It's just a formality. Clarence looked at Margaret, frightened. Can they do this? They can try, she said. But you have the right to defend yourself. You're not a lawyer, Carol shouted. Stop giving legal advice. I'm giving advice as a friend. A friend? Carol let out a cruel laugh. You barely know my father. You're after his money, it's obvious. Margaret felt a rage she hadn't known in years. Listen here, young lady. I returned every penny I found. If I wanted to take advantage, I'd have kept it all and pretended I knew nothing. Of course you returned it, because you knew you'd get caught. Carol, that's enough, Clarence intervened. Mrs. Johnson is a good person. Dad, she's manipulating you, can't you see? I'm not being manipulated. I'm being respected, something you haven't done for years. The lawyer spoke up. Mr. Roberts, we have a medical report here stating you show signs of senile dementia. The guardianship process is already underway. What report? I haven't seen any doctor. Yes, you have, Dad. Remember when you scheduled that appointment for your annual checkup? You said it was just routine. It was. And the doctor detected the signs. Clarence turned pale. That's a lie. I remember everything. Dad, you forget where you put things, mix up dates. Everyone my age gets confused sometimes. Margaret realized Carol was prepared. She had documents, a lawyer, everything planned. Mr. Roberts, do you want to come with me to the courthouse tomorrow? We'll talk to someone about your rights. You can't, Carol protested. He's under my responsibility now. Not yet, the lawyer said cautiously. The process isn't finalized. Then he can still speak for himself, Margaret retorted. Carol and the lawyer left, threatening to return with a court order. That night, Margaret barely slept. She kept thinking about how to help Clarence. She didn't know much about the law, but she knew seniors had rights. The next morning, she and Clarence went to the courthouse. They managed to speak with a public defender, Dr. Susan, a woman in her 40s who listened attentively. "Mr. Roberts, the guardianship process has indeed been initiated, but you have the right to an independent evaluation." "What do you mean?" "A doctor appointed by the judge will examine you. If they find no mental incapacity, the case is dismissed. And if they do, then you'll need a guardian. But it doesn't have to be your daughter. You can appoint anyone you trust." Clarence looked at Margaret. "Can I appoint Mrs. Johnson?" "You can, if she agrees. But she needs to prove she's capable of managing his assets. It was a huge responsibility." Margaret felt honored but also apprehensive. "Let's see how the evaluation goes first," she said. The evaluation was scheduled for the following week. Clarence got nervous, but Margaret reassured him. "You're perfectly lucid. Any impartial doctor will see that. And if they're not impartial, let's hope they are." In the days leading up to the evaluation, Margaret helped Clarence organize all the documents proving his mental capacity, bills he paid, correspondence he maintained, even a journal he wrote sporadically. "Mrs. Johnson, can I tell you something?" "Of course. No matter what happens, I want you to know these have been the best days I've had since my wife passed." "Why?" "Because I felt useful again, respected, like a normal person." Margaret got emotional. "You are a normal person, Mr. Roberts. It's your daughter who can't see that. Sometimes I wonder where I went wrong raising her." "Maybe you didn't. Sometimes people change when money's involved. It's sad to think that about your own child. But it's the truth." On the day of the evaluation, Margaret accompanied Clarence to the hospital where he'd be examined. Carol was already there with her lawyer. "Dad, there's still time to drop this nonsense. Accept the care I want to give you." "What care, Carol? Locking me up in a nursing home?" "It's a very nice place, with nurses, doctors, activities. And far from my home, my neighbors, from Buddy. Pets aren't allowed there. Then it's not the place for me." The doctor called Clarence in. He was a younger man in his 50s who seemed serious but fair. The appointment lasted 2 hours. Clarence came out calm. "How did it go?" "Well." He ran several tests, asked about my life, my routine, seemed genuinely interested in evaluating, not just confirming a pre-made diagnosis. "That's great." Carol was furious because he didn't let her in the room. "That's normal. The evaluation has to be private. The results would come in a week. Those were anxious days for everyone." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. During that week of waiting, something happened that changed everything. Margaret was coming back from the store when she saw Carol at her doorstep, talking to Howard, her landlord. "Mrs. Johnson," Howard called. "Could you come here?" She approached, wary. "Carol here was telling me some interesting things," he said. "What kind of things?" "That you've been taking money from her father. Money he's not fit to manage." Margaret felt her blood boil. "That's nobody's business." "Yes, it is," Carol protested. "My father's being exploited by an unscrupulous person." "Mr. Howard, you've known me for 5 years. Have you ever seen me exploit anyone?" "No, but..." "She offered to pay 6 months' rent for my place if you evicted me," Carol blurted, unable to hide her eagerness. Margaret was stunned. "Is that true, Mr. Howard?" The man shifted uncomfortably. "She made the offer, but I didn't accept, Mrs. Johnson." "Good. But I'm worried about this situation. If there's legal trouble involved..." "There's nothing involving me. The lawsuit is between father and daughter." "But you're caught in the middle. I'm defending an elderly man being harassed by his own daughter." The argument was cut short when Clarence arrived with Buddy. The dog immediately growled at Carol. "What's going on here?" "Carol's trying to ruin me, Mr. Roberts. She offered money to my landlord to evict me." Clarence was outraged. "Carol, how could you do such a thing?" "I'm protecting you, Dad. That woman is taking advantage of you." "Taking advantage of what?" "She treats me with kindness, keeps me company, takes care of Buddy when I need to go out." "What do you do for me besides trying to put me in a home?" "I care about your well-being." "No, you care about my inheritance." The argument grew increasingly heated until Buddy did something unexpected. He ran into Margaret's backyard and began sniffing the ground in a specific corner. "What's he doing?" Margaret asked. "I don't know," said Clarence, puzzled. Buddy started digging with his paws, determined. "Stop, Buddy, you're going to make a mess," Carol complained. But the dog didn't stop. He kept digging until his claws hit something solid, a small but heavy metal box. Clarence bent down and picked it up. It was locked, but the latch was simple. "What's this?" "I don't know, I've never seen this box before." Margaret brought a screwdriver and they managed to open it. Inside were old documents and some photos. "My God," Clarence murmured, staring at one of the photos. "What is it?" "This is my wife. But this house, it's here. Margaret's house." Margaret took the photo. It showed a young woman in front of her house, but decades younger. "I don't understand." "Wait." Clarence examined the documents. "These are property papers. From 1978, Margaret's house belonged to my wife." Everyone fell silent, processing the information. "How is that possible?" Margaret asked. "My wife inherited this house from her parents, but she sold it in 1979 when we got married. We needed the money to buy our current home. But why were the documents buried here?" "I don't know. She never told me she hid them." Carol tried to grab the papers, but Clarence wouldn't let her. "Let me see that, Dad." "Why, it's none of your business." "Yes, it is. If they're important documents, I need to know." "You don't need to know everything about my life." Margaret was confused, but a suspicion began forming in her mind. "Mr. Clarence, would you like to come inside so we can talk calmly?" They went inside, leaving Carol outside with Howard. "Mrs. Margaret, this is very strange." "It is, but it might explain some things." "How so?" "Buddy knew where to dig. How did he know that?" "I don't know. He's never been here before." "Or has he?" They looked at each other, thinking. "Mr. Clarence, I'm going to ask a strange question. Did your wife ever live here with you?" "No. When we married, she sold this house and we moved into mine." "But before you got married?" "She lived here with her parents, but they passed when she was still young." "And after?" "She was alone for about 2 years before we met." "And Buddy, how long have you had him?" "Since..." Clarence paused. "Since shortly after my wife passed. He showed up at our door one day, skinny and lost. He seemed to know the house." "What if he didn't just show up by chance? What if he knew the house because he used to come here with your wife?" "What do you mean?" "What if your wife came here in secret to visit the house where she grew up and brought Buddy along?" The idea made sense. Clarence grew thoughtful. "It's possible. She sometimes went for walks and took longer than usual. Said she liked revisiting places from her youth. And Buddy always went with her?" "Always. They were inseparable." "So he knows this house. That's why he knew where to dig." "But why would my wife hide the documents here?" Margaret had a hunch. "May I see the papers?" Clarence handed them over. She read carefully. "Mr. Clarence, it says here the sale was cancelled." "What do you mean?" "The buyer backed out. The sale wasn't finalized. Technically, the house still belonged to your wife when she passed. That means that the house is yours by inheritance, and I've been living in a house that doesn't belong to my landlord." The revelation hit like a bolt of lightning. Margaret had been living for 5 years in a house that actually belonged to the man she'd just met. "So who's the legal owner now?" she asked. "If my wife didn't leave a will, I'm the heir, since we were married under shared property." "And if you had left a will?" "I made one 2 years ago. I left everything to Carol." Margaret felt her world collapse. If the house was Clarence's and Carol was the heir, she could be evicted at any moment. "Mrs. Johnson, don't worry, I'll fix this." "How?" "I'll change my will." "I can't accept that." "Why not? You saved Buddy, helped me when Carol was harassing me. You're more family to me than my own daughter." Outside, they heard Carol yelling at Howard. "You're losing money. If this house isn't yours, you can't charge rent anymore." "Calm down, Mrs. Roberts. Let's sort this out properly." "There's nothing to sort out. I'm calling my lawyer right now." Margaret and Clarence exchanged glances. "I think we have a bigger problem now," she said. No, now we have a solution. How so? Mrs. Johnson, would you like to go into partnership with me? What kind of partnership? You keep living here, I sell my big house and move in too. We split expenses and take care of each other. The offer was tempting, but Margaret hesitated. What about your daughter? She's not my problem anymore. All she cares about is money. But she's your daughter, Mr. Roberts. A daughter who wants to institutionalize me against my will isn't family. She's an enemy. Margaret understood his feelings, but she knew the situation was complicated. Let's wait for the medical evaluation results first, then we'll decide. They were interrupted by the arrival of Gregory, Carol's lawyer. Mr. Roberts, I need to speak with you urgently. About what? About the discovery of this property. It changes everything in the guardianship case. How so? If you've hidden assets, it proves you're incapable of managing your estate properly. I didn't know about this house, but you should have. As the heir, it's your duty to know all your properties. My wife never told me. That only confirms mental decline. A lucid person would know their own assets. It was a cruel trap. Anything Clarence said would be used against him. Mr. Gregory, Margaret intervened, you're twisting the facts. You're not a lawyer. Don't comment on legal matters. But I know manipulation when I see it. Watch your words. I can sue you for slander. Then sue me. I have nothing to lose. The lawyer bristled but focused on Clarence. Mr. Roberts, you have 48 hours to come to my office and sign the voluntary guardianship papers. Otherwise, we'll file for emergency involuntary commitment. You can do that. We can, especially now that there's evidence of financial mismanagement. After they left, Margaret and Clarence were devastated. Mrs. Johnson, I think it's over. Don't say that. They'll get me committed, then they'll take everything. Don't despair. Let's talk to the public defender again. What's the point? They have money for expensive lawyers. But we have the truth on our side. The next morning, the medical evaluation results arrived. Clarence was within normal limits for his age. No signs of dementia or mental incapacity. See? I told you were fine. But now they'll use the house against me. We'll figure it out. Margaret had an idea. She went to see Eleanor, the neighborhood's oldest resident. If anyone knew the house's history, it was her. Mrs. Eleanor, do you remember the family who lived in my house before? Of course. The Petersons, Mrs. Dorothy and her Walter. After they passed, their daughter was left alone. Was the daughter married? She was engaged, married a fine young man, Clarence, hard-working, honest. And the house? Oh, that was a whole drama. Mrs. Dorothy really wanted her daughter to keep the house, but the young man had his pride, didn't want to live in his mother-in-law's house. So what happened? The girl sold the house to buy another one with her husband, but at the last minute, the buyer backed out. She was devastated. And then? Then she moved out anyway, but she'd come back here from time to time, always with that little dog. She'd sit by the gate, reminiscing about her childhood. Recently? Up until just before she passed, about 3 years ago. Always came alone, just with the dog. This confirmed Margaret's theory. Clarence's wife had an emotional connection to the house and must have hidden the documents during one of those visits. Mrs. Helena, would you be willing to tell this to a judge if needed? Of course, dear, I've always been fond of the family, and this business with the daughter trying to institutionalize her father is just plain ugly. Do you know the daughter? Known her since she was little, always been self-serving. When her mother got sick, she disappeared, only showed up at the funeral. Margaret knew they had a crucial witness. Now she needed to use this information wisely. She went to see Susan, the public defender, and shared everything she'd uncovered. Very interesting, the lawyer said. This changes everything. How so? If Mr. Clarence didn't know about the house, he can't be accused of mismanagement. And if the discovery was accidental, through the dog, it proves he wasn't hiding anything. What about the restraining order for institutionalization? We'll challenge it. With the favorable medical report and this evidence, it'll be hard to justify guardianship. What if they push through anyway? Then we'll appeal, but I doubt it'll come to that. Margaret felt some relief. Maybe there was still hope. But Carol didn't give up easily. The next day, she showed up with an ambulance and 2 orderlies. "I'm here to take my father. We have a court order." "What order?" Margaret asked. "Psychiatric evaluation. 72 hours. "But he's already been evaluated by a general practitioner. Now he needs a specialist." Clarence was terrified. "I'm not going. You can't make me." "Yes, we can, Dad. It's a court mandate." One of the orderlies stepped forward with restraints. "Mr. Clarence, please cooperate. It'll be easier for everyone." "No, Margaret, help me." She blocked the orderlies. "Wait, let me see that order." "This doesn't concern you," Carol snapped. "It does. I'm his friend." "Friendship doesn't grant legal rights, but citizenship does. Show me the paperwork." Carol flashed a document covered in stamps. Margaret didn't understand it all, but saw it was legitimate. "Mrs. Johnson," Clarence said, voice shaking. "Please take care of Buddy." "I will, and I'll get you out as soon as I can." The orderlies led Clarence away. He kept turning back to wave at Buddy until he disappeared into the ambulance. The dog stood frozen at the gate, whimpering in a way Margaret had never heard before. "Easy, Buddy. We'll bring your owner home." But she didn't know how. She spent the rest of the day on the phone with Susan, trying to make sense of it. "It's a legal maneuver, but a shady one," the defender explained. "They claimed urgency based on the hidden property. But the medical report was clear." "Yes, but they found a psychiatrist who insisted on further evaluation." "A psychiatrist they paid?" "Most likely. It's an ugly but common practice." "What now?" "Now we go to the hospital and demand a second opinion." "Will they allow it?" "They have to. It's the patient's right." The next morning, Margaret went to the psychiatric hospital where Clarence was admitted. It was a clean but cold place that made her feel very sad. "I'd like to see Mr. Clarence Roberts." "Are you a relative?" "I'm a friend." "Only relatives are allowed to visit." "But he has no other relatives besides the daughter who admitted him." "I'm sorry, those are the rules." Margaret felt desperate. How would she know if Clarence was okay? She decided to call Dr. Susan. "I'll get a court order for visitation, but it might take a few days." "A few days? He could get worse in there." "Margaret, I understand your concern, but we have to follow legal procedures." "What if the legal procedures are being used to hurt him?" "Then we'll prove it, but with patience and strategy." Margaret went home frustrated. Buddy was lying in the spot where Clarence usually sat, not eating, not playing. "I know how you feel, Buddy. I miss him too." The dog looked at her with the saddest eyes. "We'll bring him back, I promise." But the hours seemed to drag. Margaret couldn't focus on anything. She kept imagining Clarence alone, confused, not understanding why he was there. On the second day, she decided to return to the hospital, even though she knew she couldn't see him. "Please," she begged the receptionist, "I just want to know if he's okay." "I can't give out information, but I brought his dog. Maybe it'll cheer him up." "Animals aren't allowed?" "Not even in the courtyard?" "Nowhere." Margaret left even more frustrated. She took Buddy home, but the dog seemed to understand where his owner was. He stood frozen at the hospital gate, refusing to leave. "Come on, Buddy. We can't stay here." He didn't move. "Please, come with me. Your owner wouldn't want you suffering like this." The dog finally followed her, but reluctantly. On the third day, Dr. Susan got the visitation order. "We can go now, but prepare yourself. Sometimes these places leave people very shaken." Margaret was nervous when they arrived at the hospital, and she grew even more nervous when they saw Carol leaving. What was she doing here? Probably talking to the doctors. Is that allowed? She's his daughter. Technically, she's the legal guardian during his hospitalization. They found Clarence in a common room, sitting in a chair, staring at nothing. When he saw Margaret, his eyes lit up. "Margaret, you came!" "Of course I did. How are you feeling?" "Terrible. They give me medicine that makes me drowsy, and they keep asking strange questions." "What kind of questions?" "About my life, my money, my wife. Like they're looking for something." Dr. Susan introduced herself. "Mr. Roberts, I'm your public defender. We came to check on your treatment." Dr. Susan, thank goodness. I need to get out of here right away. We're working on it. But I need to know, how has the evaluation been? Strange. The doctor already seems to have his mind made up about me, no matter what I say. What do you mean? If I say I remember something, he says I'm imagining it. If I say I don't remember, he says it's dementia. Margaret and the defender exchanged worried glances. Mr. Roberts, said Dr. Susan, I'll request a second evaluation with a different doctor. Can you do that? We can try. The visit lasted only 30 minutes. When they left, Margaret was furious. He seemed different, slower, confused. It's the medication. They're probably sedating him. Is that legal? It depends on the medical justification. If they claim he was agitated, but he's not agitated. He's the calmest man I know. I know, but it's their word against ours. Margaret felt powerless. It seemed like the system was conspiring against Clarence. Dr. Susan, how long can they keep him there? Officially 72 hours, but if the doctor certifies he needs more time, can they keep him indefinitely? Not indefinitely, but for a few weeks, yes. It was a nightmare. Margaret imagined Clarence being medicated against his will for weeks, leaving there truly confused and weakened. We have to do something. We are, but it takes time. Time he doesn't have. That night, Margaret barely slept. Buddy was also restless, pacing the house, whimpering softly. The next morning, she had a desperate idea. She took Buddy and went back to the hospital. She stood outside the wall in the back courtyard, where there were a few windows. Buddy, bark for your owner, call him. The dog understood immediately. He began barking loudly, a specific bark Margaret had only heard when he was calling for Clarence. After a few minutes, she saw a figure approaching one of the windows. It was Clarence. He had recognized Buddy's bark. Margaret waved at him and he waved back. Even from a distance, she could see he looked unwell, worn down, but at least she knew he had seen her, and that he knew he wasn't abandoned. Let's go home, Buddy. He knows we're fighting for him. When they got home, there was a surprise waiting. Mrs. Eleanor was at the door, accompanied by a younger woman. Margaret, this is my niece, Dr. Christine. She's a lawyer. Hello, Margaret. My aunt told me everything. I want to help. But I already have a public defender. I know, but I can work alongside her. I'm familiar with cases of wrongful confinement. You won't charge, right? Because I can't afford a lawyer. I won't charge a thing. It's a matter of justice. Dr. Christine was a woman in her 40s, determined and capable. She reviewed all the case documents. This case is poorly supported. The initial report they submitted was done without a proper in-person examination. What do you mean? The doctor who diagnosed dementia only spoke with your Clarence for 15 minutes. It's impossible to diagnose dementia in such a short time. And the hospital doctor? I'm still looking into it, but I suspect he has a conflict of interest. What kind of conflict? He might have some connection to the family, or a financial stake in the case. It was a new hope. Margaret felt more encouraged. What can we do? First, I'll request the suspension of his confinement. Second, I'll ask for an evaluation by an impartial medical board. And if we don't succeed, we will. I have experience with this kind of manipulation. Dr. Christine worked all day preparing the legal motions. By late afternoon, she had obtained an injunction to suspend Clarence's confinement. We did it. He'll be out tomorrow morning. Margaret was overcome with emotion. Really? Really? The judge agreed the confinement was rushed. What about Carol? Can she stop it? She can try, but now we have stronger arguments. Like what? The favorable medical report, Mrs. Eleanor's testimony, and most importantly, the discovery that the doctor who requested the confinement is distantly related to Carol's ex-husband. So it really was manipulation. It was, and now we'll prove it. The next morning, Margaret and Dr. Christine went to pick up Clarence from the hospital. He came out still a bit drowsy from the medication, but happy. Margaret, I thought I'd never see you again. You'll never go through this again, Mr. Clarence. Now we have a good lawyer on our side. And Buddy? He's at home dying to see you. The reunion between Clarence and Buddy was emotional. The dog went wild with joy, jumping, barking, licking his owner's face. "I missed him so much," Clarence said, moved. "He missed you too. He barely ate these past 3 days. Poor thing. Now you're together again." But the joy didn't last long. On the same day, Carol showed up with a new restraining order. "Dad, this order is worthless. I got it overturned." "How?" "I proved you're a danger to yourself and others." "What danger? I haven't even left the house yet." "The fact that you're living with a stranger who's taking advantage of your mental confusion is proof enough." Margaret got angry. "I'm not taking advantage of anyone." "Of course you are. You're living in a house that belongs to my father." "Because I didn't know that, and your father said I could stay." "My father isn't in any condition to make that decision." Dr. Christine stepped in. "Carol, this second order is illegal. I'll challenge it immediately." "Who are you?" "Your father's lawyer." "My father doesn't have money to pay a lawyer." "I'm working pro bono." "Oh, really? And what's your interest in this?" "Justice." Carol laughed scornfully. "Justice? Everyone has a price. What's yours?" "Carol," said Clarence, his voice firm, "that's enough." "Dad, you don't understand what's happening." "I understand perfectly. You want my money. I want to take care of you." "Take care? You forced me into a psychiatric hospital. It was for your own good." "My good is being with people who treat me with kindness and respect. These people are manipulating you." "And you? What are you doing?" The argument was interrupted by the arrival of 2 court officers. "Mr. Clarence Roberts?" "That's me." "We have a court order for compulsory escort. You need to come with us." Margaret was desperate, but they just released him. "This is a new order, ma'am." Dr. Christine examined the document. "This is from a different judge. I'll challenge it, but for now, he has to go." Clarence turned pale. "Margaret, this time, I don't know if I'll come back." "You will. I'll fight to the end." "Take care of Buddy." "I will." They took Clarence away again. Buddy ran after the car, barking desperately. Margaret felt completely defeated. It seemed like every time they won a victory, Carol found a way to reverse it. "Dr. Christine, can they keep doing this forever?" "No, but we need to be smarter than them." "How?" "By digging deep into Carol's motives. If we can prove bad faith, her entire case could be thrown out." "And how do we do that?" "I need to talk to some people. Clarence's old neighbors, Carol's co-workers, people who know the family. It was a slower strategy, but maybe more effective." "How long could it take?" "A few weeks." "And Mr. Clarence? Will he stay there all that time?" "I'll try to get more frequent visits, and we'll monitor how he's being treated." Margaret felt powerless but didn't give up. Every day she went to the hospital to try to see him. When she couldn't, she stayed outside with Buddy, so Clarence would know he wasn't alone. Dr. Christine worked tirelessly, investigating the family's past. And after 2 weeks, she made an important discovery. "Margaret, I found something very interesting." "What is it?" "Carol tried the same thing with her mother before she passed." "What do you mean?" "I found a neighbor who's known the family for decades. She told me that when Clarence's wife got sick, Carol tried to convince her to sign over all her assets." "Did she succeed?" "No. His wife was very sharp. She saw right through her daughter and refused." "And then?" "Carol disappeared, only showed up at the funeral." "What a cruel daughter." "Worse, I got a copy of the will Clarence's wife made shortly before she passed." "She made a will?" "Yes, and she left everything to her husband, with one specific clause. If he died or became incapacitated, the assets would go to charity, not their daughter." "Does Carol know?" "Probably not." "The will is on record, but she never looked for it. Does this change everything?" "It changes everything. If we can prove that Carol is trying to get the guardianship to go against her mother's wishes, she could be accused of acting in bad faith." "And how do we prove that?" "With this will and the witnesses I found." It was the turnaround they needed. Dr. Christine prepared a new petition attaching the will and the witness testimonies. "Now let's see how Carol explains herself," she said. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Margaret was nervous but hopeful. On the day of the hearing, the courthouse was packed. Carol arrived with her lawyer, looking very confident. But her expression changed when she saw Dr. Christine with a folder full of documents. "Your Honor, Dr." Christine said to the judge, "We have evidence that this guardianship petition was filed in bad faith." "What evidence is that?" "First, the will of the respondent's mother, which the petitioner was unaware of." The judge examined the document. "This will is valid, and it clearly excludes the daughter from the inheritance if the father is declared incapacitated." Carol turned pale. "I didn't know about this will." "Exactly," said Dr. Christine. "That's why you filed for guardianship. If you had known about the will, you'd have realized you wouldn't inherit anything if your father were declared incompetent." "That doesn't prove bad faith." "Oh, but it does. We have witnesses who can testify that you tried the same thing with your mother before she passed." "That's a lie." "Mrs. Mary Elizabeth," Dr. Christine called, "could you confirm to the court what you told me?" The neighbor stood up. "Yes, doctor. I saw when Carol tried to convince her sick mother to sign papers. Poor Mrs. Dorothy was very weak, but she refused. She said she didn't trust her daughter. And then Carol disappeared. She only showed up at the funeral, searching the house for documents. Carol's lawyer tried to challenge the witness, but he couldn't shake her testimony. "Your Honor," Dr. Christine continued, "we also have medical reports proving that Mr. Clarence Roberts is mentally competent. The hospitalization was unnecessary and traumatic. Furthermore," added Dr. Susan, who was also present, "the doctor who requested the hospitalization is related to the petitioner's ex-husband. There's a clear conflict of interest." The judge looked visibly angry. "This is serious. I'll order an investigation into this doctor." Carol and her lawyer exchanged nervous glances. "Your Honor," the lawyer tried, "my client acted in good faith, concerned for her father's well-being." "Well-being?" Margaret interjected, having asked to speak. "Your Honor, may I share how I met Mr. Clarence?" "You may." Margaret told the whole story, from the dog dragging the bag of money to how she cared for the animal and the friendship she developed with Clarence. At no point did he show any signs of mental incapacity. On the contrary, he was the one who insisted on rewarding me for taking care of the dog. And when we found out I was living in a house that technically belonged to him, he immediately offered to make things right. And what is his proposal for that? He wants me to keep living there, paying fair rent, or sharing the house with him, since we're both widowed and alone. The judge considered everything she had heard. "Based on the evidence presented, I rule as follows. First, the guardianship petition is dismissed for lack of merit and suspicion of bad faith. Second, Mr. Clarence Roberts is to be released from hospitalization immediately. Third, no further attempts at guardianship may be filed for the next 5 years, except in cases of genuine mental deterioration confirmed by an independent medical panel. Fourth, I order an investigation into the doctor who requested the hospitalization." Margaret couldn't hold back her tears of relief. Carol stormed out of the courthouse furious but defeated. "This isn't over," she shouted. "Oh, it is," Dr. Christine said, "and if you try anything against your father, we'll sue you for harassment." They went to pick up Clarence at the hospital. He came out worn down by the days of forced hospitalization, but happy to be free. "Will I never have to go through that again?" "Never again," Margaret assured him. "And what about Carol?" "She's been barred from filing another petition. And my inheritance? It'll go where your wife wanted it to you while you're alive, and then to charity." "That's good. That's exactly what she wanted." The reunion with Buddy was even more emotional than their first meeting. The dog seemed to understand that this time, his owner was free for good. In the days that followed, Clarence and Margaret organized their lives practically. He sold his big house and officially moved into the smaller one. They split expenses, and each had their own room. "Mrs. Johnson, can I confess something?" "Of course." "These have been the best months of my life since my wife passed. For me too. It's been a long time since I felt useful and loved. You're a special person. So are you." They became an unconventional but very happy family. Clarence took care of the yard and handled small repairs around the house. Margaret cooked and managed the indoors. Buddy was the king of the house, spoiled by both of them. Their combined retirement income allowed them to live comfortably. Clarence still had his savings, now safely in the bank, and Margaret no longer had to worry about money. Carol tried several times to reconnect with her father, especially after learning he was financially secure. But Clarence stood firm. "Carol, you had plenty of chances to be a caring daughter. You chose to be selfish. Now I've found a family that truly loves me. But I'm your flesh and blood. Blood isn't everything. Love and respect matter more. Are you cutting me out of the inheritance? You cut yourself out when you tried to have me committed. Dad, I can change. You can try, but you've lost my trust for good." Eventually, Carol gave up and moved on. Clarence and Margaret never heard from her again. 6 months after the first hearing, they held a small celebration at the house. Mrs. Eleanor, Dr. Christine, Dr. Susan, and a few neighbors came to celebrate Buddy's birthday. 8 years old, Margaret said, cutting a special dog-friendly cake. 8 years of loyalty, Clarence added. If it weren't for him dragging that bag, none of this would have happened, Mrs. Eleanor reflected. True, Margaret agreed. Buddy was our matchmaker. How so? He brought together two lonely people who needed each other. And saved an old man from a greedy daughter, Dr. Christine added. What matters is that we're a family now, Clarence said. Buddy, the center of attention, wagged his tail happily, surrounded by love. A year after their first meeting, Margaret and Clarence sat in the backyard watching Buddy play with a ball. Mrs. Johnson, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret returning the money? Never. It was the best decision of my life. Why? Because I gained something far more valuable than money. What? A family, and the certainty that I did the right thing. I feel the same way. If you'd kept the money, I would have lost Buddy and never met the wonderful person you are. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. No, thank you. For everything. They sat in silence, watching the dog who had changed their lives. Mr. Roberts? Yes? Do you think your wife would approve of our friendship? I'm sure she would. She always said what matters in life is having good people by your side. Then she'd be happy, very happy. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold, the same color as Buddy's fur. The house was at peace, filled with love and gratitude. Shall we go to the park tomorrow? Margaret asked. Let's, all three of us. Like a real family. Like a real family. Buddy came running and lay down between the two elderly folks, content. He had fulfilled his mission to protect his owner and bring happiness to everyone. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave a sincere comment below. Do you believe Margaret made the right decision by returning the money? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.